Well, a great joy to be here with everyone. I think if I were to ask the question, how many of you here are currently dealing with karma and wanting to know how to deal with it, I think everyone would raise their hand. I think anyone who wouldn't raise their hand, if they looked within a little bit more, either they would see that they are indeed either having just come out of some intense karma or about to work on some, or you are a God-realized master. And I won't ask those of you who are realized masters to raise your hands. This topic of karma and reincarnation is much misunderstood, but in a way it's one of the most important things to try to understand, to learn how to cope with life, with spiritual growth. It's the root cause behind all of our suffering. It's the root cause behind success also, but success is a two-edged sword, and I'll get into this, talking about, quote, good karma versus bad karma. And so there's a lot of misconception around it. And not everyone believes in reincarnation, but there's enough evidence nowadays where you read stories of children who have seen their past lives, taken their parents to a village where they said they were in the past life and who they were, and it turns out they had uncanny details about their past life. There's some scientist, I don't recall who it was, who said that a few hundred years from now, he said, America will be known as that very strange place where the people did not believe in reincarnation, because it's something that reincarnation makes more sense than not reincarnation. When you look at why we are here, why it explains so many of the mysteries of our own lives, why things happen, etc. But there's also a lot of misconception and confusion around it. There's a very funny story of somebody who they believed in reincarnation and they understood these principles. And they were very wealthy, but also very greedy. And at the end of their life, they didn't want to let go of their money to give it away or share it or anything. And so they went to a psychic and they tried to get not a past life reading, but a future life reading to find out who they would be reborn as, so that they could will all their money to that person, and then right that way they could hold on to it in their next lifetime. And we laugh, but in fact I think if we look closely at that story, we'll probably see some of our own misconceptions mirrored in that story. And in fact, one of the principles of reincarnation is that karma and reincarnation are tied at the hip. They are so closely related. You cannot have one without the other. And so karma, one of the great misconceptions is that people often equate it with sin. I made a mistake in a past life, I'm a bad person, I'm suffering for it, I'm being punished for it. And that is not really how it works. It's really to teach us lessons in life, to help us understand, to grow in understanding, to develop spiritual qualities and spiritual attitudes. And we'll talk more about that later. It's really about the school of life and the divine, loving divine hand giving us lessons to learn. And we call it good karma, bad karma, but in fact it's just the divine teaching us lessons. And this idea of good karma versus bad karma, and we want only good karma and we don't want bad karma, there was a study done in America. And the study was done on people who had won millions and millions of dollars in the lottery. And it was a study to see their level of happiness before winning the lottery, after winning the lottery, and how their life evolved in the ensuing years. And I think without exception, they saw that immediately after winning, their happiness level increased, but immediately within weeks, months, went back down to its former level. And in fact, without exception, they said that these people's lives actually became worse in the following years because of this so-called good karma. They started indulging in drugs and alcohol. Family members started trying to steal their money from them. And it just created much, much more difficulty in their life than they had ever had before. And so you could honestly say that winning the lottery and winning millions, you could say that it's bad karma if you think about it in this way. And so rather than putting value judgments, good or bad, rather for the one who is really trying to get at the root cause of problems and really understand what's behind karma, what's behind all these lessons that we're given. This is what we're trying to do today. Because if we can understand what is underneath our life's problems, then we can learn to cope with them, learn really what the cause of it is. But we will also talk today about how to free ourselves much, much more quickly and easily from the limitations of our karmas. And so the great ones, the great masters, that's one of the reasons they came. They came to show us the way out of delusion. And the way out of delusion is not just to, as Swami Kriyanandaji often used to say, we're not just trying to make this mud puddle that we're living in called Earth, make it a nicer mud puddle, because there are much nicer planes of existence. And so we are really trying to get out of this wheel of reincarnation and karma altogether. And we're trying to, in a sense, opt out of both good and bad. And so that's also what we will be talking about today. Just one touch on the idea of reincarnation before later on we'll get into it more. This is something that I think is hidden from us, because I think we're meant to try to figure these things out for ourselves. Yoganandaji was not keen, for example, on people getting past life readings to find out what they did wrong in the past life to cause their problems in this life. And he hinted that in most cases, not necessarily everyone, we're meant to figure it out for ourselves. And this sort of leads again to this idea that karma and reincarnation are part of this vast, lifetimes-long learning process. We're in a school. We're here to learn lessons, to figure it out, to learn attitudes, to learn qualities. And once we learn one lesson, then we go on to another until we become completely free. And so try to see the lessons that are given to us not as bad, not as our punishment for being sinners in the past and making mistakes, but simply to say to the divine, to our higher self, okay, what do I need to learn here? And see it as an opportunity. Swami Kriyanandaji said something very interesting one time that I have found very helpful over the years. He said that, and I saw this in his own life, especially in the early years when he was, at least to all appearances, was working on karma and spiritual growth and development. He said that when someone points out a fault to you, or if you have a fault that comes up and you finally recognize it for the first time, it's natural, isn't it, to get disappointed when you see it. Disappointed in yourself, or disappointed that, oh no, this is a big thing I'm going to have to work on. He said rather, when you see a fault in yourself, he said you should clap your hands and rejoice. Because he said that, in fact, this thing has been there all the time. Without our knowing it, it's been holding us back and limiting us. It's like a big weight in our cells, in our spiritual cells, holding us down. And finally, when we are aware of it for the first time, then we can start to work on it for the first time. So he said it's a cause for celebration. He once said regarding the yoga postures, which he taught this whole branch of Ananda Yoga, Hatha Yoga, that works with the inner energy, works with affirmations, mental statements that you repeat over and over again. He said regarding that awareness precedes control, meaning that awareness of these inner energies precedes learning how to control those energies. And so it is also with learning our faults and learning, and I hate to use the word fault, it's more just a veil of mud over our true self. And our part simply is just to keep washing away that mud and reveal the true self within. Because those things really are not who and what we are. And we tend to over-identify with our karmas, with our limitations, with our personality. We look in the mirror and we say, I am Devarshi, and I'm this type of person or that type of person. And part of reincarnation, actually, and this is something Yoganandaji indicated, that one of the reasons that we don't remember our past lifetimes is, one thing he said is that it would be horrifying to remember all the stupid things we've done in all these countless lifetimes, many, many stupid things, and we would start to identify with them. And in a way, a new rebirth is like a reboot. It's a fresh start, so that we don't remember those things. And part of it is that even in this lifetime, we see how much we identify with our limitations, with our faults. And so much of, especially meditation, yoga, and all these things are really a way of turning our identification from this little self, this personality, our likes and dislikes, and turning our attention to that divine self. And by turning our attention over and over and over again, it starts to fan the flames and awaken that divine self and make it more powerful and strong. And that is one of the great ways to overcome karma and reincarnation. It's probably the greatest way, and ultimately it's the final way, which is to be free of this identification with the little self. Yoganandaji described the spiritual path that we practice as self-realization. And he defined it as self-realization is the knowing in all parts of body, mind, and soul that I am now in possession of the kingdom of God. I need not pray that it come to me, for God's omnipresence is my omnipresence, and all I need to do is to improve my knowing. And it really is as simple as that. We overcomplicate it by imagining all these difficulties and all these karmas. And I can't tell you how often daily maybe I am advising someone on how to overcome a limitation or karma, and their first response is, but what about this? But I can't do that, but it's not going to work because of that. And it really is much simpler than that. We try to complicate it. I think the adult mind especially is very adept at complicating things. The childlike mind keeps it very simple and pure. And I think to some extent we all need to, I wouldn't call it revert back to that childlike approach. I would say more likely advance to that more childlike approach of that simplicity. And this is why daily meditation is an integral part of overcoming the bondage of karma and reincarnation. Now, I'm going to talk about a little bit about introducing the idea that we'll both talk about changing your destiny. What Paramahansa Yoganandaji said. He said that, and I'll quote him, he said, in India particularly is the way he put it, there has been too much emphasis on karma. Karma, karma, they cry. It's my karma. I can do nothing about it. Absurd. Karma is simply action. Whatever has been done can just as certainly be undone. He said, Americans have to a much greater extent the consciousness that everything is possible. If it can be done, I've heard many people say here, he was living in America at the time, we will do it. And if it is impossible, we will do it anyways. It may just take us a little bit longer. Eventually, they say, why not now? That is the spirit I like so much. And so, again, the adult mind who thinks that it knows all these things and all of the rules of the universe and all these philosophies, it does come in and say, wow, I know how difficult this is. It's impossible. I cannot do it. And again, the childlike mind has this enthusiasm that hasn't been burned by experience and says, I can do anything. And the whole world is open up to me. And so meditation, again, brings us back to that attitude that we can do it. And as I'll talk especially later on towards the end, it's not just us by ourselves doing this, it's us doing it with the divine help, with the divine. As Swami Kriyanandaji very often said near the end of his life, he said, if you lift one hand up to God, God will lower two hands down to pick you up. And so this is the ways, many ways that we have of overcoming, defeating, controlling our destiny. And this controlling of our destiny, we should not live in the past. Yes, we've made mistakes. We're paying now for some of those mistakes. We're having to learn lessons. But the fact is that, as Yoganandaji said, we are in control of our karma. We can change it. We created it. We can change it. And start thinking now about what can I do now to change the next 10, 20, 30 years of my life and my karma. I saw a banner one day I was driving, and it was a beautiful divine truth, expressed to entice people to spend money, of course, but it was a divine truth. And this statement said, the best time to buy a new flat is always 4 years ago, meaning that the prices are always going up and people think, oh, if I just bought 4 years ago. And so the best time to buy a flat is 4 years ago. Where will you be 4 years from now? And it was a really good question, because where we will be 4 years from now is determined by what we do in the next 4 years. Action and reaction, that is very simply the law of karma. For every action, there is a reaction. Karma is based on the Sanskrit word referring to action. And so, through our actions, but more so through our mental attitudes, through mental energy, through meditation, through where we put our concentration, our desires, attachments, our minds, as we work on that during the next 4 years, you will find that 4 years from now, if you really work at it, you'll actually realize the truth. That the best time to start working on your karma was 4 years ago, which maybe put a note in your calendar, your Google Calendar or whatever, 4 years from now. A note saying, remember what was said at this talk about 4 years from now. Because I can guarantee you that if you work consistently at it now, you can and you will change your karma. Because karma, again, simply is action and reaction. And we have control over that. And so don't see this as something that we are victims of, something that we cannot change, something that we cannot control. Yes, we have karmas from the past, we have lessons from the past that we haven't learned yet. But there are also ways to mitigate those effects, to become free from those effects inwardly so they don't touch us, in terms of inward suffering. And I'll touch on this just briefly now. But there's a difference between pain and suffering. Pain is when you experience a physical pain. Suffering is when you experience anguish and wish, oh, this pain is too much, I wish it would go away, I don't like this pain. And so a good part of yoga, not the physical yoga, but of the art and science of Raja Yoga, is learning to become inwardly free from the effects of karma, so they don't touch us anymore. And that is something else that I will also talk about more towards the end, early in the afternoon here. So Sagar will come up again, share some more things, and then I'll come back.
So the reason we did these exercises, by the way, is Yogananda ji often said, the first prerequisite to be able to deal with any karma is we have to have energy. And he would often say that he preferred an energetic thief to a lazy spiritual person. Because he said, give me an energetic thief, all I need to do is turn his energies in some other direction. And that's why many of his close, highly advanced disciples were self-made millionaires. And not because he wanted their money, but because he said they had to put so much energy out to become millionaires. All I need to, and they had to have so much concentration, so much determination. All I had to do was tell them, okay, shift all these qualities on your pursuit of complete freedom. And they advanced very far. So energy is very important. And since this is a practical class, one simple practical tool I am going to give you, which Yogananda ji and all the great yogis have given, to be better able to deal with your karma, is always keep your spine straight. Somebody with unless you have a medical condition, of course, but somebody with like a bent posture, do you think he can deal with karma? I don't think so. This spine, by the way, is the bow of Arjuna. The teachings Yogananda ji brought are the teachings of Bhagavad Gita, which Krishna himself gave. One of his missions, he said, was to clarify the original meaning that Ved Vyas had when he wrote the Bhagavad Gita. And so he said the spine, straight spine is what is meant by the bow of Arjuna. All the devotees, all the aspirants who want to fight their karma have to have that bow. But sometimes life gets the better of us. There are too many things, and what happens? We say, it's too much, I can't fight. And that's what is meant when in the Bhagavad Gita, Arjuna drops the bow. That was a higher age. And Arjuna didn't really have a wooden bow and an arrow. But the Bhagavad Gita is deeply symbolic. And Krishna's whole sermon is so Arjuna can take the bow again, stand and fight. This bow is asana, right posture. In fact, Yogananda ji said that all the characters in the Bhagavad Gita have deeply esoteric meanings. For example, he said the Pandavas represent the 5 chakras and Draupadi represents the Kundalini, which is why she has to marry all 5. And of course, she wasn't really a lady with 5 husbands. Vyasa wove in a lot of this allegory. Of course, many of the main characters did live, but not in the way we think they did. And it's very interesting since we are talking about this. We all know how the Pandavas were born. Kunti had this boon, you all know. Durvasa had given her this boon saying, you can summon the gods to give you children. And basically what Vyasa was saying was, she had the ability to summon spiritual energy. The 5 awakened chakras represent spiritual energy. And Kunti represents the power to summon spiritual energy. But her father, his name was, I don't know if all of you know, some of you might know, Kunti Bhoj. And the meaning of that word simply is he who rears Kunti or he who supports Kunti. And Yogananda ji said, Kunti Bhoj represents asana, the straight spine. Because without a straight spine, life force cannot move up, awakening the chakras. No awakening of the chakras, no release from karma and reincarnation. That's why always keep your spine straight. Even this simple tool, if you get it into habit, now that doesn't mean you can't use your backrest. Use the backrest of the chair. But keep the spine straight, keep the energy in the upper chakras. Okay? Now, Devarshi ji mentioned very correctly that what has been done can be undone. Whatever karmas we have generated can be nullified. Now Yogananda ji added this, and many of you will like this analogy because you will have experimented with it. And I'll give 2 analogies. One for the ladies and one for the guys. Okay? The first one which Yogananda ji said was, suppose, and this the ladies will understand. She said, if you peel garlic, it's very easy to get the smell of garlic on your fingers. But it's very hard to get rid of. And he said, so it is with karma, be careful. It's very easy to create karma, but it's very hard. Getting rid of that karma takes a lot more effort. So create the right kind of karma. But he added, just as by repeated washing, the hands can be made free of the odor of garlic, so by the right techniques, by the right tools, you can completely get rid of your karma. But why do that? Which will have to be undone later with a great deal of effort. And the point here is clear, but just because I said I have one more example for the guys, here's how I will put it. It's very easy to get that thrill and speed your car and get a dent. But undoing the dent is not so easy. You have to spend a lot of money, you have to take the car to the mechanic, which represents the guru. You can't undo your own dent. You have to go to the guru of the car in this case and say, sir, here's my car, I submit it to you, help me get rid of the dent. And then by following the mechanic's advice, you can get rid of the dent, and the wise mechanic says, don't get one more dent. Now, don't do the same things again and again. But remember, acting without using our intelligence sometimes and creating karma is easier. But being right and not creating wrong karma is the wiser way. I'll add one more thing here, because Devarshi ji mentioned karma and learning are lessons. One of my brother Brahmacharis is a doctor, and when he was practicing in a where we have our ashram near Vatunde, which is in the remote village, he found somebody who came to him, a villager, who had paralysis on one side of his body. And he had gone to many people who had not been able to help him. The paralysis lingered. But Aditya taught him these energization exercises of Paramahansa Yoganandaji, which stimulate the nerves and do many other things, but they stimulate the nervous system and gradually train the nerves to carry more energy. And he said, practice these energization exercises as many times as you can. He gave him only 4 or 5, and he did it like few hundred times every day. And then, of course, he came back a few months or weeks later, and he was walking happily. And and then he said he got cured and he went. Now, most people have remembered, I think, when Aditya tells this story, that energization cured this person of paralysis. And in some way it's symbolic of certain physical karma getting taken care of. What I have always remembered is I asked Aditya later, Aditya, once that person got cured of his paralysis, did he ever come back and ask, I want to know more of these teachings. If they helped me so much with just one karma, maybe they can help me become completely free. And Aditya said, no, he never came back. And many times this happens with us. We seek spiritual help for momentary relief when suffering is too much. But as soon as that suffering is taken away, rather than learning the lesson that, unless we develop wisdom, this suffering can keep repeating in different forms. Let me put the effort and get completely free, we just walk away. So if you are here, it's alright. If you have certain pains, certain karmas to deal with, of course you have to look for the remedy. But take one step beyond and look for the final remedy which exists, so that there is no possibility of any suffering recurring. Okay? So those are the few things I wanted to talk about on karma, but I want to talk more about reincarnation. And as usual, to engage people, I'm going to ask a question. Are people here convinced that they don't want to reincarnate? Can I see a show of hands of people who want to reincarnate? God, Yoganandaji sometimes used to say, God is very cruel in some way, in a playful way. And he said, and he didn't say this, but I say this, every time I have played a video game, I have felt, why don't I have unlimited lives? Those 3 lives and then the game is over. I want more lives, I want more lives. And here God has granted our wish. We have unlimited lives. And until we get it right, we keep coming back. But I have a question. All of you seem to be convinced that you don't want to reincarnate. But I am not convinced. And I give you the reason why. Many of you here have read, you have read the Bhagavad Gita, is that right? In one way, one form or the other. And some of you might have seen B.R. Chopra's wonderful enactment of that drama. Excellent, very well done, very good characters. I love it, I watch it now, these days also, sometimes. And in the Bhagavad Gita, there is a shloka. The most famous shloka. Yada yada hi dharmasya glanir bhavati bharata abhyuthanam adharmasya, and all those things. Vinashaya dushtutam dharma sansthapanarthaya. What's the last word? Sambhavami yuge yuge. So what Krishna is saying is, to destroy evil, I'll keep reincarnating again and again. So Krishna himself is saying he is happy to keep reincarnating again and again. Why are we all scared? And if you read the Gita, he tells Arjuna, don't keep reincarnating. But he himself is saying, I'm fine, I'm happy reincarnating. He doesn't say, I'll be very unhappy to reincarnate, but still I will do it. He says, I'll keep reincarnating again and again and again and again. And Yoganandaji, in one of his poems, he wrote, if need be, to help my disciples, I'll keep coming back even 1 trillion times, to bring them back to God. And so here the masters are happily talking about reincarnation. And we are somehow convinced we don't want to reincarnate. What's the catch? There is a catch. And I'm trying to engage you all. What's the catch here?
The catch is that we need
Our absolutely. Our reincarnation is forced reincarnation due to our karmas. And all the Gita says is don't get into the forced reincarnations, because then you are in a prison and you have to serve your sentence. If you come freely to help make the prison a better place, like the masters do, that's all right. So be very clear, we want to get rid of forced reincarnation. Because, now why do we want to get rid of? Because these things have to be talked about. The masters, by the way, they enjoy this world, and Yogananda ji often said, when you can come into this world freely, this world is a wonderful place. Just like you all must have read Harry Potter or the Mahabharata or Lord of the Rings, there's a lot of killing happening there. But everybody enjoys those books because you know it's only a book. It's only a novel. The best movies, the more the action sequences and the more new ways the hero slaughters the villain, we love it. Matrix, you saw, that slow motion capture, we loved it. Because we knew it was only a movie. And so Yogananda ji said, when you wake up in God and realize this is only a movie, then this world is fun. And Yogananda ji used to say, God is the best playwright. He has written this complex, beautiful play to entertain us. But we have to know how to be entertained. And for that we have to learn how to not reincarnate forced by our karmas. And there, Yogananda ji often used to tell this story. Why not keep reincarnating forced? And he said, because the karmas never get satisfied. And he would tell this story. Many of you maybe already know, because I see familiar faces. But it's worth telling. And this is apocryphal. So Yogananda ji said there was a yogi who was pretty highly advanced, but not completely liberated. And he was very happy with his meditation. He used to feel this great joy. But he had indigestion. So he felt, God has created this beautiful, all these tastes and foods. I need to have a good digestion so I can enjoy good food. Good desires certainly are allowed by God. That's what he thought. And so when he was dying, he told Lord, my beloved, next life I want to be just like this, communing with you, a deep meditator and a yogi, but give me good digestion also, so that I enjoy your world through the sense of taste. And God said, are you sure? And he said, yes, I'm very sure. Next life he was born a great yogi and with a very good digestion, but he didn't have the karma to make sufficient money. And so he had this huge body with this great appetite and the ability to digest food, but no money to feed the body. So he was always starving. And so of course he said, when God came at the end of second life, sir, this time I'm a slightly wiser. Not only do I want to be a great yogi with a good digestion, but I also want a good bank account. And God said, are you sure this is right? Yeah, this is perfect. I know I'll enjoy the next life with great bliss. And so the third life the yogi was born. God is very true. What we ask, he gives. Be careful what we ask. That's what the yogis say. So God gave him a deep realization, though not complete liberation, because he had these other desires. He had great digestion, great bank account, so he was happily enjoying food. But when you have a good life, you want to share it with somebody. So he started getting lonely. He looked around, he says, see, everybody has a companion. I am unhappy because I don't have a companion. I want a companion also. So on his deathbed there, where he was having this one desire, he said, next life, God, give me the yogi samskars, good health, wealth, and a companion. And Yogananda ji said, God asked him, are you sure? Perfect, Lord. This time I know exactly what I want. And so the third time he said he was born with wealth, health, a great yogi, with a wife who nagged the life out of him. That's how Yogananda ji put it. And this is not to demean wives, of course, because there are good wives, there are bad wives, everything, and good husbands and bad husbands, anyway. But the point here is, he hadn't specified the kind of companion. What you don't specify, your karma chooses for you. And so he got this wife, and all day in life he was nagged, and finally he was dying of super nagging. And God came to him and he said, oh, this time I know what to ask. Health, wealth, yogi samskars, and a good wife. And God said, okay, done. Are you sure? He says, yes, done. So the next life he had health, wealth, yogi samskars and a good wife, but just as they were about to start on this nice life together, the wife died of some illness. And so here he was crying, he was so devoted the rest of the life. He worshipped her photo, her socks, her gloves, and always crying, remembering what could have been. And so he was again dying dissatisfied. And God said, okay, what now? And he said, well, this time I'm going to make an airtight prayer. I know exactly. I've learned from 6 dissatisfied lives. Now I know. He says, I want health, wealth, yogi samskar, and a good wife who lives long. This is an airtight prayer. So God said, okay. Now, unfortunately, the wife lived too long for him. This is how Yoganandaji put it. And when you live too long, you start developing wrinkles. And so he was very unhappy. Oh, my wife has become ugly. And at that time, because he was wealthy, he got lured into this other lady who was after his money. And so he was having this duvidha, as they call it. Should I stay loyal to my good but ugly wife? Or should I go with my young but pretty whoever lover? And finally he said his heart swayed towards the lover. And the lover, of course, was after his money. Life is complicated. And so she ditched him after she got his money, and he was left without the pretty wife and without the good wife. And so he was crying again at the end of that lifetime. And God came and said, okay, what's it that you want me to grant this time? I have brought my notepad. There are these 5 conditions. What's the next one? Let me write it and give you another life. And he said, now I know, Lord, nothing doing. There is always some red tape. Now I realize all I want to ask is that you be with me. Because if you are with me, if I am in the state of samadhi, whatever the outward circumstances, I am in bliss. And if you are not with me, then whatever the outer circumstances might be, they change and then I become unhappy. And this is the lesson Yoganandaji wanted us to learn, which is why he said, don't come back forced into this prison due to reincarnation, because outer conditions will never be perfect. Okay? So, that was just a little bit to convince us that we don't want to come back and reincarnate force. Because remember that perfect life outwardly always evades us, and all we do is we exchange one karma for the other. Now comes the question, now that we are happy that we don't want forced reincarnation, how do we get rid of forced reincarnation? And there are 2 things here. What do you all think? What's the first thing to get rid of? Yes, very nice. Egoic desires. Because those are like that yogi had all those desires born from the ego. Those desires keep bringing us back. And we want to get rid. The desires create attachments. Duryodhana represented material desires. Very hard to fight. That's what the name Duryodhana means. Yuddha means battle. Duryodhana means that which is hard to fight. Desires are very hard to fight. And they create attachments. And attachments instigate desires. Karna represents attachments. And is always instigating Duryodhana. Let's fight, let's win. Let's do this wrong thing. Yes, Vastraharan, yes, you should do it. Gambling, yes, you should do it. That's what attachments does. They instigate us to fulfill our desires. And that's why Duryodhana and Karna are such nice buddies. But desires ever fed, never satisfied, as Yoganandaji said. And we want to learn how to get rid of our desires and attachments. I often joke, and I'll ask you this, since many of you travel. How many kilos are you allowed on the domestic airlines check-in luggage? 20 domestic airlines?
27.
The farther the travel, the lower the luggage. Astral Airlines? 0. But when you die and you look from above and you see all that luggage with your name tag, my house, my wife, my children, my desires, these things, ambitions that were thwarted, after some time in the astral world, you start hankering for those again. And then when the desire is strong enough, you say, maybe I should go down there again. And take care of my luggage which is lying there, unattended, so to speak. And you are reborn. And that is why desires are best gotten rid of. Because Yoganandaji said, after you die, you take your samskars and your desires with you. They are a part of the astral body. And if you want to get rid of them here now. Because it's not worth it. You keep coming back. And he would often joke and say to his students, if you have the desire for apple pie, you have to be born in America. If you have the desire for curries, you have to be born in India. And of course, one of the monks misunderstood Yoganandaji and started eating a lot of curries. Swamiji asked him, why are you doing this? He said, I want to be born in India next life, so I can become a great yogi and attain liberation. But of course, what Yoganandaji was saying is, get rid of your desires, even while you are here. Swamiji once asked him, what if I have a desire for ice cream, natural ice cream? Yoganandaji said, well, there's no natural ice cream in the astral world. What about a cigarette? There's no cigarette in the astral world. You have to come back. Certain desires can be satisfied in the astral world. Desire for beauty, because the astral worlds are much more beautiful. But most of the desires, we have to come back. And that's why ideally get rid of mundane desires. Have preferences. I prefer to eat natural ice cream over Amul ice cream. It's okay. I want Amul ice cream. I want a mango. When the heart gets involved, then yes, God says granted. And next life, as the yogi's situation happened, we are caught up again. Now there is one more thing I want to add, because somebody very smartly asked Yoganandaji, sir, if desires are the cause of reincarnation, certainly the best way to get liberated is commit suicide. Because, a person who commits suicide has no desire to do anything in this world. So he shouldn't get reincarnated. And Yoganandaji said, oh no, it's not that easy. And as Devarshi ji mentioned, he said, this is very important. He said, getting rid of desires is one part, but the second part is this world is a school and you have to learn life's lessons. This is so important, because think about it, many of you have children. Now if a child comes to you on the first day of school and says, Mom, I am so non-attached to the school. I have no desire to go into the school. I am complete within myself. Please don't send me to the school. What will the mother say? Sir, all that is good, but where will you learn your lessons? How will you grow up? And this is what happens. Now, the call for desirelessness is not passive. Some people, they are couch potatoes. They sleep all the time, while who will earn the money to feed the family? I don't know. I don't have any desires. How will the children get educated? I don't know. I have no desires. I am complete within myself. And Yoganandaji very bluntly said, the lazy bones will never find God. And so the lessons of life have to be learned. Very important. Not just desirelessness, but the active kind. We have to dynamically learn life's lessons. Now think about this. Realization and self-realization and freedom is about becoming a college graduate, not a college dropout. Many times when we come to spirituality, we think, oh, we want to drop out. I don't want to do that. I don't want that challenge. But you have to graduate from school. All the saints from all religions, from all lineages, think about their life and you will see they were graduates of college. They had learned all of life's lessons. They weren't dropouts. And that's why Divine Mother freed them, saying, you have graduated from this school. There is no need for you to go back except as an emeritus. Except as an alumni, because alumni can help schools, no? They donate a lot and make the schools much better. So as alumni, we want to help the school, but we don't want to drop out. So remember, as Devarshi ji mentioned, we have to learn our life's lessons through karma. The tests of karma help us. They are just these teaching courses, if taken with the right attitude. Now, which brings us to the next important question. What are these life's lessons? And in this book, The Essence of Self-Realization, which is a fantastic book, might be on the book table, talks about all these topics. These are actually conversations Yoganandaji had in Swamiji's presence, and Swamiji has made these notes. There is a chapter called The Lesson of Reincarnation. And here, Yoganandaji says this: the lesson of reincarnation is to neutralize the waves of likes and dislikes, of desire and aversion, by the expression of kindness, forgiveness, and compassion to all, and by steadfast contentment in the self. We must love others not for their human personalities, but because they are manifestations of God, who dwells equally in all. And just to parse this statement, the first one is important. The lesson of reincarnation is to neutralize the waves of likes and dislikes, of desires and aversions. Now remember, it's not just likes and desires, dislikes and aversions also. And Yogananda ji often used to say in a playful way, because he was in the US. He said, if a white person hates the blacks too much, next life he is born as a black. Because dislike and aversion is as good, as strong a bond, because we have to learn life's lessons. And he said, many families you see are always fighting each other. There is no peace in those families. And he said, they were enemies before. And so God said, well, work out your enmity at close quarters. So we have to be careful. Get rid of likes and dislikes. Have preferences is alright. Desires and aversions. And then he says, and the expression of kindness, forgiveness and compassion to all, by steadfast contentment in the self. Don't neglect those lessons. Those are very important. When you learn, and Yogananda ji said, well, here are a few more qualities that we have to learn in this life. Learning fearlessness, patience, compassion, kindness, calmness, perseverance, truthfulness. Where will we learn this if not in this school? Swami Vivekananda often used to say, this world is the gymnasium where the soul comes to build its muscles, which is one way of saying that it's a school where we come to learn our lessons. Learn these lessons. Now, there is 3 or 4 ways, and you all will help me with this, in which we can learn our lessons. The lesson of reincarnation is to neutralize the waves of likes and dislikes, desires and aversion, by the expression of kindness, forgiveness and compassion. When we act so that we do all these things, there is a way to act. So we neutralize our likes and dislikes, our desires and aversions. We learn to act with kindness, compassion. What is that yoga called? That is karma yoga. That is what nishkam karma means. It doesn't mean I have no desire, I won't do it. Where is the, like I said, if the family has to be fed, we have to do it in the right way by expressing these qualities. That is karma yoga. Now we have to act and use our discrimination to always be kind, compassionate, make sure we don't have likes and dislikes. What is that yoga called? When we use our intellect to do the right thing. That is Jnana Yoga. So Jnana Yoga is not cramming books and scriptures and knowing Sanskrit, and whenever somebody comes you start giving him a lecture. That's not Jnana Yoga. That is intellect yoga, which is what we want to avoid. But using our discrimination to learn these lessons is Jnana Yoga. And then Yogananda ji says, and we have to learn steadfast contentment in the self. But we have to know, and he says self with a capital S. Well, before we become contented, we have to get to know this self. And that is Dhyana Yoga, Kriya Yoga. It gives us an introduction to our own higher nature in which we can find great joy. And finding that great joy, we automatically learn to be more and more contented with that self. So that's Dhyana Yoga. And this last line, we must love others not for their human personalities, but because they are manifestations of God who dwells equally in all. Loving God and loving the presence of God in all our fellow beings is Bhakti Yoga. So these 4 yogas, as Yogananda ji said, it's not either or. All 4 have to be done together by everybody. This is the path of Raja Yoga. And Raja Yoga, the royal path which unites all these 4 yogas, learning to act right, use our discrimination, meditate, have devotion, together leads us to freedom. This is the yoga that Paramahansa Yogananda ji brought to us. Now, the Guru is so important because he gives the right dose of all these 4 components. And I'm going to again make this fun by just asking you all to give me the right answer. Think about it. Now somebody who's very active, whose nature is to do a lot of things, he's many projects, many tasks, very energetic. What would the Guru recommend him? Dhyana Yoga. See, somebody who's active, the Guru says continue with your activity but learn to have calmness. Add meditation. Some people I meditate all day. I am so awesome. Those other guys are acting they are worthless, they don't meditate. Somebody meditating 8 hours a day, what does the guru go and tell him? You are overbalanced towards dhyana yoga. The wise guru will not say meditate more unless that person is highly advanced. He said, serve God in others also, don't be selfish. Somebody who's very intellectual, has learnt all the scriptures and knows all the shlokas and very good at pointing others' faults, what kind of yoga would the guru suggest? Bhakti yoga, so nice. He says, you are too much here. See, he won't say read more books. And this is a clue for you all. Find out your nature and get that balance, because we need that balance. And somebody is always saying guru, guru, guru. Yogananda, he said he would suggest to them, well, that's good, but do your part also by using your intellect and acting in the right way. And Yogananda ji was like that. He was very personal. Two of the monks, one of them was very emotional, and as soon as they said to meditate, he would start crying and rolling on the floor and weeping. And this other monk, who was very, very in the mind, went to Yogananda ji. He was like disgusted, went to Yogananda and said, sir, is it right for somebody to display all these emotions outwardly? And Yogananda said, by all means, if you are not intoxicated and mad for God, why will he come to you? So he said, okay. But then he called this monk and he said, you know, dynamite, if it's exploded in the skies, all it creates is light and sound. But if it's exploded deep within, then it creates useful things. Tunnels, bridges, foundations. And he said, your devotion should be like that. Bury it deep within. Don't expend its energy outwards. So all these teachings we share in our classes on Kriya Yoga. These are all part of the path of Kriya Yoga. And I'm going to take 2 more minutes, Devarshi ji, and end with on some fun notes. One is how to know our past lives. And as Devarshi ji mentioned, it's not important, because we have done enough wrongs that we don't want to be reminded of that again. And he also said, we don't remember past lives because we always remember the bad things. And you will see in your relations with your relatives, if your wife or husband or mother always loves you, but sometimes does something wrong, you will hold it against them for the rest of their life. And Yogananda ji said that is why the God does not allow us to remember our past lives, because we cling to the wrong things. But he said, here's a way. You can figure out who you were in your past life. Try to analyze the tastes and the likes and the attractions you had in the first 4 or 5 years of your life. And I, as a young child, I had this attraction to collect stamps, which not everybody has. And if you think about it, it might say that I have traveled to these distinct cultures and I like seeing, imageries from those cultures. But if you go back, some of you might be interested in music. Somebody might be interested in cooking, might have been a chef, And if you go back and do this as a fun thing, just for fun. Some of you, when I saw Autobiography of a Yogi, I was very happy, and there was some past life connection there. Some people, when they listen, they see the violin, they just take it up. There's a past life connection there. So with these hints, one can try and realize who they were in the past life. Now, second thing I wanted to say, which is important, is about conception. Yogananda ji said, because this is very important in reincarnation, he said when the sperm and the ovum unite, at that time a flash of light is created in the astral world. And based on the vibration of that light, the consciousness of that light, which depends on the consciousness of the parents, a soul is attracted to that light and gets born in the womb of the mother. And so he would often say, be aware. How many people here want to be the proud parents of the next Dawood Ibrahim? Next Adolf Hitler? Next Ravana? Why leave these things to chance? And Yogananda ji said, make sure your consciousness is uplifted. When somebody came to Yogananda ji and said, how many want a spiritual child? Most of you will. Well, he taught how to do this. He said, have an uplifted consciousness, and not just for 6 months, saying we'll be uplifted for 6 months, then we'll start fighting again. But have an uplifted consciousness towards each other. Make your home and your family an ashram, then saints will be born. make your home a brawling place where fighting and cursing and abusing is on, well, those souls who when they are born want to go to brawls and pubs will be born there. So use these teachings, keep your consciousness uplifted, especially at the time of trying for a conception, and you can summon spiritual children into your house. So with that, I'm going to yield it back to Devarshi ji.
Thank you, Sagar. I think we'll do a little bit of an exercise now. And I think we all saw from doing the exercise that Sagar led us in with the affirmation, how it changed our consciousness. And changing our consciousness, our level of energy, our magnetism, has a lot to do with overcoming karma, as I will talk about. So let's just sit upright. If you can sit away from the back of the chair and have your shoulders back and chest out, all the better. Close the eyes and gaze upwards towards the point between the eyebrows, not cross-eyed, but looking more out and up into the distance, which by itself, looking upward and out, uplifts our consciousness. And just watch the breath for a few moments, just to get calm. If you're aware of the air coming in through the nostrils or the lungs moving in and out, just feel that. Pay attention to that. This is one of the best ways of calming the mind, is simply be in the moment, watching the breath. And now we will do an affirmation together. These are simple phrases written by the great ones that when we repeat them with willpower and energy, they have the power to change our consciousness, to free us from limitations. So we'll say together, out loud and with energy, I leave behind me.
I leave behind me
Both my failures and accomplishments.
both my failures and accomplishments.
What I do today
What I do today
will create a new and better future,
will create a new and better future,
filled with inner joy.
filled with inner joy.
I leave behind me
I leave behind me
both my failures and accomplishments.
both my failures and accomplishments.
What I do today
What I do today
will create a new and better future,
will create a new and better future,
filled with inner joy.
filled with inner joy.
And now more quietly and deeply, I leave behind me
I leave behind me
both my failures and accomplishments.
both my failures and accomplishments.
What I do today
What I do today
will create a new and better future,
will create a new and better future,
filled with inner joy.
filled with inner joy.
And now just whispering, but with deep attention, I leave behind me both my failures and accomplishments. What I do today will create a new and better future, filled with inner joy. And now just feel the inner freedom and joy of that attitude of leaving everything behind. And to add to this, we'll do a practice taught by Swami Kriyanandaji. Again, eyes gazing upwards, behind closed eyelids. So visualize a bonfire there at the spiritual eye, and offer into that fire all of our past karmas, our attachments, our desires. Feel that this is the divine light. This is an inner fire ceremony, offering all seeds of past karma, good, bad, limitation, bondage, everything into that fire, and feel it burning up. becoming smoke, drifting away, and feeling the divine inner freedom that comes from letting go like this. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. And now just look at yourself and feel the inner freedom that you feel from that. And you'll find that so much of freedom from karma, freedom from limitation, bondage, and the effects of karma are really something that is under our control. And while your karmas may not have gone completely away, your inner freedom grew. And I'll be talking about this in a little bit. I'm going to come back first to karma, and we tend to get caught up in our karmas, and they seem unending. We work on them, they seem difficult, they seem impossible. I think all of us have experienced this reality at times, seeming reality of being beaten down by our karma. When is this karma going to be finished? But in fact, karma is finite. As Swami Kriyanandaji often said, he said, God is not some punisher who just wants to punish us for our sins. And in certain religions, they talk about eternal damnation for our sins. And as Swamiji often said, he said, there cannot be an eternal, infinite effect from a finite cause. And karma is cause and effect. And karma is finite in all ways. It always has a beginning, it always has an ending. I had a very vivid experience of this some years ago, where it was about maybe 20 years ago. I stepped on what I thought was a nail, and it poked my foot, and I went to the doctor, and he did everything he was supposed to do, gave me a tetanus shot, and everything looked good. But then a week later, 2 weeks later, it felt like something was inside there. Something had gotten in there, a piece of the nail or something. So we had x-rays done, didn't show anything. A few weeks later, a few months later, when I would walk, sometimes there'd be this sharp pain. I knew something was in there. So this doctor, who's also a good friend of mine, and a very good doctor, he cut my foot open and looked for it, couldn't find anything. So this went on for years. And sometimes it would go away. Sometimes, at that time I was doing a lot of running and jogging, and I'd be out running, and all of a sudden my foot would come down, and all of a sudden there'd be just like stepping on a sharp nail suddenly out of the blue. And I wasn't suffering greatly, it was just foot pain, and foot pain can only cause so much suffering, but it was just, I could see there was a karma there. And one of the things that I learned from this one was try to see our karmas as a puzzle. Don't get too caught up in the anguish and the suffering, and just see, okay, Lord, you've given me this puzzle to solve, to figure out. Try to be calm and just understanding, and you'll find that you can actually reach understanding much more quickly. What I also learned was to not be passive. I was always trying to find out, well, what's going on there? I went back to the doctor again, and this went on for about 12 years. And it wasn't unending pain, but just I'd be walking, and all of a sudden, just suddenly out of the blue, it was just like someone stuck a big needle into the bottom of my foot, and I knew there was something there. And finally, after about 12 years, there started to be some sort of eruption or like a wart on the bottom of my foot. I went to my doctor and I said, I swear there's something in here. And karma is like this, it's hidden. We don't know the cause of it. We don't know what's happening. But in order to get rid of it, we have to get it out by the roots. We have to find the source. And so I was really trying to figure out this puzzle. And so my doctor said, well, it might be such and such, and I won't get into the details. And if you're a doctor, you can ask me afterwards. But he started working on what he thought it was, which it really wasn't. But in fact, it caused a cure. And what happened was I was soaking it in water one day and pushing at it just to see. I knew there was something inside there that was trying to come out. And I started pushing on it, and all of a sudden, out of the blue, I looked, and there was this really shiny, bright thing just starting to appear out of my foot, almost like magic. And I pulled and pulled, and it was a shard of glass that was 1/4 inch long that had been floating around my foot for 12 years. And when I would run, it would bounce it around and move it, and then every once in a while I would get in a place where it wouldn't hurt. And I swear, I measured it. I had to get out a tape measure and measure this thing because it was just so outrageously long and shiny and sharp and everything like that. And it was a good example of karma. Karma has a beginning, karma has an end. And our part, yes, is not to just accept it passively, but to put out the energy, to try to keep finding a solution. And it's interesting that the solution didn't come about by figuring out what the medical problem was. It came out by just putting out energy over and over and over again to try to figure it out and to do something to fix it. And the solution was not a direct result of what the doctor did. It was in a way, but he even figured out the wrong diagnosis. But being a wise, intuitive doctor, the solution came from that. And so one of the other things I learned from this is, again, most importantly, karma is finite. It has a beginning, it has an end. It has a finite cause, it has a finite completion. And our part is simply, we don't know how long it's going to take. If it had taken another 12 years for that karma to come out, that would have been fine. Our part is just simply to keep putting out the energy, to try to solve it, but also to be detached from the results. Because this was sort of a minor karma for me, I was detached. I was more like, this is an interesting puzzle. I know there's something in there. What is it? I need to figure it out, not because I was suffering so much, but just because I was really curious. But one other thing I also learned from this is that at the very end, those last months before it came out, it was starting to hurt a lot more as it was working its way out towards the surface of the skin. And I've seen this with other karmas. The most pain is when we start the karma. Imagine when you get really upset with someone and you say something really angrily towards them and hurt them. We feel pain when that happens. And similarly, when the karma starts coming out years later to the surface, that's when we tend to feel the most pain again. And this is actually, for me, it's a good sign now. When I am experiencing the karma of the past coming up and it's at its most anguishing or painful or difficult, I have learned to trust that it's starting to just come to the surface finally. It's been there all the time. And happily now it's finally starting to come out because, again, I saw that as the karma worked out in that case, it was at its most painful and most difficult again. So karma is finite. Try to be impersonal with your karma, as I was with that. It's easy to be impersonal about a pain in your foot. I've had much, much worse pains in my head from a severe nerve condition in the facial nerve that was more difficult, I have to say, because you identify more with this area around the brain. With my foot, I could be impersonal with that. It was kind of far away from my center, and I could deal with it in an impersonal way. But it's a good lesson. Try not to identify with your karmas. Try to just have a certain amount of impersonalness and dispassion and saying, okay, this is happening to me. It's not who I am. I am not this condition. I am not this suffering. I do have to put out energy, and I'll talk about this in a little bit. Because putting out the energy to solve this karma, I believe this constant putting out energy and trying to solve that problem created the magnetism that attracted the solution and hastened that karma of working out. Because if I had done nothing, it probably would have taken another 10, 20, 30 years for that karma to finally work its way out. So our part is simply to try, leave the results to God, nishkam karma, in working out karma, by doing our best, putting out the right energy, and trust that, yes, karma is finite. It will eventually work its way out. And I've seen this with many other karmas in my life, that this is a very true principle. And so, as we work out karmas, difficult karmas, we also want to do it with this understanding that, I'll get into more ways, very practical ways, to hasten the working out of karmas, to mitigate past karma, to reduce past karma. But one of the most important that I'll talk about now and skip ahead is this idea of putting out energy and magnetism. Because again, karma is simply action. It's not what we think of as just the outer action. It's more the intensity of our own intent in performing an action. And so if you accidentally, knock over a glass of milk, yeah, you've created a karma of spilling some milk. And it's a minor karma. Maybe someday you'll be in a restaurant and somebody will knock over a glass of milk and spill it on you. And this is a very interesting thing that Yogananda taught. You may think that that's completing the karma in and of itself, but unfortunately not yet. He said if you react negatively and get upset at this person spilling milk on you, he said you've created more karma. Because the karma, most karma is of thought and reaction and emotion. And this is why he said, try to be even-minded and cheerful in all things. And what comes of itself, let it come, he also said. So when these things happen to us and something, quote, bad happens to us, just try to see it, okay, Lord, you're helping me work out some past karma. Thank you, it's all gone. But if you react emotionally and negatively and get angry with the person, then it just creates more karma. But going back to just the action itself, if instead of just accidentally knocking over a glass of milk, you get in an argument with someone and you slam the glass of milk and send it flying and glass everywhere, same action, but the second action has a lot more intensity of energy and thought and anger, and much, much more karma is created by the very same action. And so don't worry about so much about karmas and mistakes that you make with good intention, because that's going to happen. If our intention is good to help someone to act properly, we're going to make mistakes, and this happens in life, in this world of duality. And don't worry about those so much as far as creating karma, and work instead more on attitude and desire to give, desire to share, desire to love, and then all these things will smooth out. And in fact, that is one of the great ways to hasten the working out of karma, which I'll talk about in a little bit. Now, Yogananda talked about desire as the greatest thing, as Sagar talked about, as what keeps us coming back again and again. And we don't get rid of desire. In a way, we replace one desire with another. Because people sometimes who are more intellectual, they'll say, well, the desire for God is a desire, isn't it? And that's going to keep you reincarnating again and again, and you want to get rid of that desire too. And the way Yoganandaji put it, he said if you have a splinter in your skin, you need to take a thorn or something else sharp and remove that splinter. And so, in a way, what we are doing with our desires is turning them into higher and higher desires. In a way, we're transmuting those desires or turning them into a higher octave. And this is why Yoganandaji, with his own disciples, he would not have them renounce all action. He would continue with having them act. And if he saw that, for example, one of his disciples had a desire, maybe to a degree a selfish desire, to be successful, to be a very successful businessman, rather than having him suppress that desire or deny that desire, he would advise him to become a businessman, but use it to serve others and share your wealth with others. And by that means, he would transmute that desire and expand it from a limited egotistical desire to an expansive merging into God with that desire by sharing with others. And so inaction is not the way. Transmuting and uplifting our actions is the way. And so if you have a desire for, let's say, ice cream, a desire that won't go away, and people do this with their desires, especially spiritual people. And this is sort of the psychology of yoga that we have to understand. Very often spiritual people will say, well, and you see this east and west, you see this in monasteries in the east, you see it with monks in the west. A desire comes up, someone is a monk, let's say. A desire comes up. And rather than acknowledging that there's this desire there, the person will say, I'm spiritual, I don't have desires. And they just stuff the desire down. And Swami Kriyanandaji often said that when we suppress desires, he said it's like damming the water coming in from a river. And as a little boy, we used to do this. If there was a little river or creek of water, we would start putting logs and dirt and dam it up, and eventually it would get higher and higher, and finally we just couldn't block it anymore. And finally it would all burst and all the water would come rushing through. And he said this, that if you just suppress desires, he said eventually, after enough suppression, it's like a pressure cooker, where the pressure builds up so much and finally you overdo it and keep the pressure down without releasing it, it can explode. And he said that's what happens if you suppress desires. And you see this with very spiritual people sometimes doing that. The other side of it is that people, when they do become aware of a fault or a desire or an attachment, they get down on themselves. And I like to say that when we make a mistake, when we express a desire outwardly and stumble, or we have an addiction or an attachment and we just give in to it and we stumble, that Satan he gets a 2-for-1 deal with many people, because he gets them to stumble spiritually, and then he gets them to feel guilty about it. And that guilt is kind of where Satan gets a 2 for the price of 1. And so get rid of guilt when we make a mistake. When we give in to a desire or attachment or addiction, or we do something, express anger or something like that, yes, we must change, but we can't suppress it. We have to acknowledge it. But the way Yoganandaji put it, he said, give your faults to God. God likes it when you give your faults to God, because what happens is you will find that when we offer our entire self into the light, our faults become like, you know how when you walk into a room at night and you turn on the light, and if you have cockroaches in the house, as I've experienced at times all over the world, seems to be a universal problem, just like you turn on the light and all of a sudden these cockroaches, all of a sudden they can't stand the light and they start running all over the place and running into the dark corners. And so, same with our faults. If we turn on the light and offer these things into the light, they can't handle the light and they just run away. This is why Yoganandaji, the way he put it, he said you cannot drive out darkness with a stick. And this is how you see this. I've seen this more in America, where people preach condemnation against sin and sinners, and you'll go to hell for eternity, and they start beating on the darkness with a stick. And Yoganandaji said, no, you can't beat the darkness with a stick. You just have to turn on the light. It's as simple as that. And you will find that this is one of the most effective ways of reducing karma, mitigating karma, freeing us from karma, is simply continually to turn on the light. And what does that mean, to turn on the light? For a yogi, spiritually, it means very simply, as often as you can, do something that will bring you into God's light. And that can be especially in meditation, because in meditation, really true meditation is not techniques, even though that's part of our practice that we do. It's not the technique so much, it's the looking up here into the light and offering ourselves unreservedly into the light of the divine, into the light of God. And when we do that, the way Yoganandaji put it in one of his chants, his songs, he said, touch me but once, and I will change all my clay into thy gold. And so that touch of light from the divine changes our clay into gold. I think sometimes, Riley, that the person who wrote that song used the word clay because he just wanted to avoid a more profane type of word that was just more real about our stuff. Because you look at our stuff, our karmas, and there's just a lot of junk from past lifetimes. But even that can be turned to gold just by bringing the divine light into it. Now, with many practices and techniques for overcoming karma, I'll bring this one element. Even if you don't have a deep relationship with God in some way or with the divine, these other principles work, this law of action and reaction. But for those who are so inclined, try to bring this element more and more into it, which is tuning into divine grace. Because Yoganandaji talked very often about the grace of the divine being what really frees us in the end. And grace is not just something that comes to some people and not to others. It's not just some play of God that dispensed, God likes the color of your eyes and gives you more grace or anything like that. The way Swami Kriyanandaji put it, he said we must cooperate with grace. And it simply means that in addition to praying, to going to the temple, whatever you do, meditating, doing ceremonies, mantras, japa, in addition to doing that, we must also act rightly. And so we can't just go to church or temple in the morning and then come home and yell at our husband, our wife, and children and be a bad person. We also have to cooperate with that. And when we become a partner with the divine, with that grace, that's when things really change. And you see this. I have seen this in so many lives and in my own life in many ways. I had an experience of an understanding that ties this together with this idea of all of this being a school. And I was driving in Pune one day, and I enjoy driving in India. It's just for me, it's, as Sagar pointed out, it's a little bit a reminder. It's like a video game, because you're dodging cars and people are seemingly trying to kill you every block or every moment, and all these things are happening. And I think people drive crazily in India more than the West because of belief in reincarnation. Because as they're on the roads, they realize, oh, I have a lot of lifetimes in this cave. I can drive as crazy as I want. If I die, I'll just get another lifetime and I'll get back behind the wheel. And so there is some element of truth, I think, to that. But I was driving in Pune, and I was at a stoplight, and as very often happens, there was beggars coming in, tapping on the window, and that scene happening there. And I'm very rarely really touched by those things because I'm just understanding the law of karma and how these things work. I just pray for people and ask God to bless them. But one day, one particular person really touched me. It was a very elderly man who appeared to be both physically and mentally disabled. And for some reason I just thought, why is God not taking care of this person? And like our teachers, I relate to God as the Divine Mother. I just said mentally, I don't know if you can say something mentally loudly, but I did say it mentally loudly. I just said, Mother, you're not taking care of your children. And I said it with a lot of feeling, that to Divine Mother, why are you not taking care of your children here? And instantly I got an answer. And the answer wasn't her voice, but I think she was speaking through my intuition, because I think there was some truth to what I heard instantaneously. And what I heard was, I give each one exactly what they need. And I felt so much love in that statement. It wasn't some impersonal thing of, I give each one what they deserve, and I give each one what they've earned, what they need. And it was said with such love that I had to try to understand it, because I believe that it was a true statement. Exactly what they need. And I felt that this man needed that experience in the school of life to learn a very particular lesson. Exactly what he needed. And Swami Kriyanandaji talked about this once. He said that, again, speaking of beggars, he said that one time in India, he saw a bunch of beggars. And in this group, he said, one really stood out. He said it was really remarkable what he saw. And he said there was one girl, he said that she looked regal and royal, like she came from a royal family. And he tuned into her, and he could see a real anguish in her face, like, I don't belong here, what am I doing here? And he could see that in her face, and he tried to tune into her karma. And he said he felt that she, in her past life, had been very wealthy, but also very greedy, and had not shared her wealth with others, and just held it to herself. And that, in this school of life, Divine Mother, the cosmic law, both wanted to help her learn a lesson. It wasn't about punishing her for being greedy. It was like a loving mother wanting the child to learn compassion, to learn sharing, to learn giving. And so the Divine Mother reincarnated her in this very poor condition to be a beggar, to see from the other side what it was like, to experience that. And so there was no sense of punishment, no sense of sin or you deserve this. It was just the loving mother wanting to help the child take the next step. And I imagine that perhaps probably in the next life, this girl would be reborn with wealth again, so that the mother could see, okay, have you learned the lesson? Let's see if you share and are more generous this time. And so if we can look more and more as everything that comes to us, as being something that's given to us to learn a lesson. And it's not just our karma giving it to us. And this was the other part of what I heard in my intuition. I give each one exactly what they need. It's our Divine Mother, our Heavenly Father, who is personally giving us this karma because they know in their infinite wisdom what exactly that we need. And so if we can try to see it in that way, we will get through it much more quickly. Swami Kriyanandaji again, he went the biggest test that he ever had in his life. He wrote to the great saint Anandamayi Ma, and he was going through a lot of pain and suffering with this test. And he wrote to her and said, why? Why is this happening to me? How can I understand this? And she wrote back something very interesting. And she just very simply said, try to see it as your Guru's grace. And Swamiji at that time said, it was the last thing in the world I could see it as, my Guru's grace, because it was so hard. But then he said, over the years, he understood that it was the best thing that ever happened to him, because it helped him to learn particular lessons and to grow in very particular ways that could not have happened in any other way. And he just saw the infinite wisdom in that experience. He saw the infinite compassion and the love of God in that experience to help him to become free inside. And so this is the most important lesson of all, is to become free inside. And this is the way of the yogi in the end. The goal of yoga, the goal of meditation, is to achieve liberation. It is to achieve moksha. And this achievement of this divine freedom is in the heart. It's not being free from the outward karmas. Yoganandaji, the way he described moksha, it's very interesting. He said that someone who becomes Jivan Mukta, he said they still have karmas, but because they've developed such complete inner freedom, when those karmas come, they are not touched by those karmas. There's no effect, because there's no more ego cause and effect there to be hurt, to suffer. And he also said that because of that, you're not creating any more new karma. And so divine freedom is not getting rid of all the karmas. This is a big mistake and misconception that people have. If I can just get rid of all these karmas, then I'll be happy. And this is how delusion tricks us. To expand on the story that Sagar told, or to maybe make it more real to us, about the man who kept dying with these desires for, oh, if I just had this, it would be perfect. And it happens lifetime after lifetime. But don't we do that in our own lifetimes? We say, I mean, how many of us right now have a condition on our happiness? If I could only fix this one thing in my life, I would be really happy. That one thing could be our health. It could be this particular person who really irritates us. It could be wealth. It could be debt. It could be, the list is endless. But we say, if I could fix this one thing, I would be really, really happy. And then, because I see probably everyone in this room has a fair amount of success in their life, the thought comes, well, I've been able to fix this part of my life, that part of my life. I've succeeded in business. I've succeeded in marriage or health. And so I know that I can succeed at these things. And if I just fix this one thing, and I know I can do it, and you fix that one thing, finally, after years of effort, and what happens? Something else comes up. By then, the health goes away, or some other problem comes. And this is how we're tricked. And so, developing this inner freedom, and even, you don't have to wait for moksha to develop this inner freedom. Just work every day at developing the inner freedom. When these karmas come, when desires come, just give them back into the light, give them to God, and say, Lord, I want only you. I'm happy in your bliss, in your joy. And let's work this karma out more quickly, and I think it's a scary prayer to make. And I'll tell you a story. to work out your karma more quickly, because I think we try to push away karma. We try to push away tests. Oh Lord, I don't want this. I know this is going to hurt. Just, let's wait. Maybe I can do this next lifetime. Or next week we can do it. It's just like delaying hard tasks that we have to do. There was one disciple of Yoganandaji. He prayed, and I know a few others who have done the same prayer. He prayed, Lord, I want to work all of my karma out in this lifetime, every last bit of it. And it's a dangerous prayer because this particular man, 1 or 2 weeks later, he fell like out of a 6-story building onto the ground, broke just about every bone in his body, was months in the hospital. Yet, it helped him become more and more free. And so, if you are inclined, like some of us are, to say that prayer to hasten my karma, and I'm not speaking against it at all, but I would just say, at the same time pray, Lord, give me the strength to be able to deal with this. But you'll find that that strength is, in the end, is the way to divine freedom. And you'll see the answer, the proof of something Yoganandaji said. He said, an easy life is not a victorious one. And you will see that those who have great tests, but put out the right energy in overcoming them, become spiritually great as a result. If you look at the lives of the saints, they were not easy lives. The way to saintliness is not just some, beautiful soundtrack and everything looking really nice, and like in the movies. It can be pretty ugly and gruesome at times. But in the end, as Swami Kriyanandaji said, it's divine bliss. And I can say a story that ties a lot of these things together, karma and reincarnation, of my own wife who passed away, left the body about 6 or 7 years ago. And we were together for about 25 years. And here was someone with, she was a yogi all these years, a Kriya yogi, but she was, like all of us, working on karma. It doesn't happen instantly, quickly, necessarily. And yet she did have a fear, and it was a fear that many of us have. It was the fear of death. For some reason, this was just a deep, deep-seated fear. She could not make it go away. She tried everything, Kriya yoga, meditation, everything I'm talking about, all this list of things. It wouldn't go away. And finally she wrote to Swami Kriyanandaji. She had cancer for about 10 years, and it came back twice, and finally she succumbed to that. But she wrote to Swami Kriyanandaji in the last year of her life and said, I just can't get this fear out of me. And Swamiji said, very simply, for one thing, you have done this death thing 1,000,000 times, talking about all past lifetimes. When it happens, you'll realize that it's just very natural. But also realize it's just like going into the next room, is all it is. That's how almost trivial it is. And for some reason, either that hit home or just finally the grace of God and the Guru came to her, completely freed her in the end. The last weeks of her life, it was in her brain, and the doctors said, there's nothing you can do. And she was so joyful about it. The doctor said, you have 3 weeks to live. And she just said, that long? Just say, I'm ready to be free. I am free. And she just kept saying to me, well, I was in a lot of anguish. I definitely was not free of the karma the way she was. And she just kept looking at me saying, don't worry, I'm free, I'm free. And she was saying, don't worry about me. She had more concern about me than she had about her own self. And that finally is the greatest way to find this freedom, is selflessness. And selfless service, selflessness in meditation, selflessness in giving love to others, giving to others. And I think we've all seen this. I've seen it so many times. People who are going through problems, there's a tendency to contract and think, oh, I hurt, and contract into yourself. But that only binds us even more. And if you can find a way to give and to serve others, maybe even to serve others who have the same problem as you, you'll find that it dissolves the ties that bind you to that karma. The karma may still be there, but it will not affect you anymore. Just as my wife, the karma was still there. We all have to find a reason to leave the body. It's inevitable for everybody. But the test really is not to live forever, because I don't think anyone here in this room is going to live forever and defeat every cause of leaving the body. The real test is to achieve victory spiritually. And so this is the ultimate way to overcome the bondage of karma. Now I'll just touch about some very simple and practical ways at the end here of just reducing and mitigating karma. Yoganandaji said that the problem of karma, and I would really highly recommend this book, Karma and Reincarnation by Yoganandaji. We have the books out on the book table. It talks about many incredible things that I don't have time to get into. One of them is sort of a proof of reincarnation and the soul not just being obliterated at death. It's some techniques that he gives for tuning into and communicating with souls of people who we love who have left the body. And it's very particular techniques and practices. I can say that I've done these practices, I know others have, and I have been able to communicate with my wife, who is still very dear and who is still extremely present in my life. There's very little separation. As Swamiji said to her, but I think to me also, it's really like she's only in the next room. And just like if the child is in the house and the mother is in the next room, the child knows the mother is in the next room. It doesn't have to keep running into the next room and see the mother. It feels the mother's presence and love. And that's what this does. And so if you are trying to connect with a loved one, there's some incredible techniques in this book, Karma and Reincarnation. But as far as finally just some practical tips for reducing more quickly and mitigating karma. In Autobiography of a Yogi, Yoganandaji said, "This problem received attention from our rishis, thankfully. They found helpful not only a combination of metals, but also of plants and faultless jewels, and the preventive uses of these things. And then many other things that work with magnetism and changing the body's magnetism and energy." And so he recommended a particular bangle, astrological bangle, which I think someone here makes these bangles. They're expensive, but they're effective. He talks about these bangles in the Autobiography of a Yogi. They change the body's aura and magnetism. And you will find that if you can change your magnetism, which changes your aura and your electrical energy, you will find that when the karma comes, you have some more protection. And I've seen this so many times in my own life. But in a way, it's like if there's a cold virus going around, and we're run down, we're tired, we haven't been eating right, we haven't been sleeping, our immune system is weak, we're much more susceptible to that cold virus. And when it does hit us, it may hit us a lot worse. But if our energy is strong, our magnetism is good, attitude is positive, we've been eating right, our aura is strong, very same cold virus, very same karma comes, it either doesn't touch us at all or we get a little bit of it, but we're not as affected by it. And so this is how we can change our magnetism. One of the ways is tuning in to a saint or master or God. Because when we identify less with the little self and more with the divine self, our magnetism and aura become strong. You see this in saints and masters. That's why they have such big auras and magnetism, is because they are more connected with the divine self and with God than with the little self. Right attitude is one. If we have this attitude of being cheerful and even-minded, no matter what comes, then we don't have this negative reaction, which yet creates more karma and just keeps us bound in this wheel of karma. One of them is willpower and energy. If we have a great deal of willpower and energy, I liken it to when a karma is coming towards us. And I think sometimes we intuitively feel a karma coming. And there's two ways to react. One of them is to shrink and kind of protect ourselves and get smaller and smaller. And when we get smaller and smaller, and when this karma comes, it tends to just much more easily smash us over and knock us over and affect us. There's another way, and experiment with this. Make yourself stronger. Run towards the karma. Run at it and say, okay, I'm not running away from you, I'm running towards you with energy, strength, willpower. And you'll find that sometimes there's a big collision with that karma, that you'll find that we tend to come out better in that collision than if we just become weak and small. Another one is meditation and Kriya Yoga. We have classes on Kriya Yoga. Kriya Yoga as a technique, Yoganandaji said, it burns up the seeds of karma at their origin, where they are stored in our astral spine. And so Kriya Yoga very particularly burns up these vrittis of karma, these seeds of karma, at their source. day in, day out. And this really, I think, is one of the most effective ways to do this. Related to this is God contact. Swami Kriyanandaji once said that one experience of God as divine bliss, or divine love, or great expansion, he said that burns up more karma than Kriya Yoga does. Because when we immerse ourselves in that grace, there's a flow of intense and divine energy going up our spines that dissolves a lot of those seeds of karma. And finally, just inner freedom is coming back to that as the ultimate way. This is just to have this attitude of being free inside. And that comes, again, from all these things we talked about: selflessness, giving to others, expansion of consciousness, meditation, turning our identification from little self to the divine self. And so there are so many ways to change our destiny, change our karma. Our part simply start now. Again, I'll go back to something I said at the beginning, which is we should have a banner up here saying, the best time to start changing your karma is 4 years ago. Where will you be 4 years from now? And think about that, because I would say do an experiment. Again, put a note in your Google Calendar, a reminder 4 years from now. And spend the next 4 years really concentrating. What's 4 years? It's just a small portion of life. Really concentrate on doing many of these things that I talked about. And look at the changes. I think I can guarantee that you will see that your destiny changes and your karma changes through our own actions and energies. And so in the end, we do have control. It's our part simply to start acting in the right way, in all the ways that we've talked about. And there are many more ways. We could have another hour talking about these different things. But I think we're out of time. It's a little bit after 1 o'clock. And do we have time for a question or two, or should we just in person? So I'll stay after, Sagar will stay afterwards, and you can come up personally, ask us any individual questions that you have. So thank you all.